Who are we? How can we be happy? Does the universe have a purpose? Greek philosophers approach the big questions of a lifetime, sometimes in a genuine scientific way, and sometimes in a mystic ways, but always in an imaginative fashion. Pythagoras considered charlatan for claiming the Deuterian and reincarnation, a half-naked Socrates, a haranguing people in the streets with a provocative and unanswerable questions. Aristotle, tutoring great generals, these can be examples of how Greek thinkers dared to question the traditional conventions and to challenge the prejudice of their age, sometimes putting their own lives at risk. Greek philosophy, as an independent culture genre, began around the 600 BCE, and its insights still persist to our times. About 600 BCE, the Greek cities of Ionia were the intellectual and cultural leaders for Greeks, and the numbers one-sea traders of the Mediterranean. Miletus, the southernmost Ionian city, was the wealthiest Greek cities and the main of the Ionian awakening, a name for the initial phase of a classical Greek civilization, coincidental with the birth of Greek philosophy. The first group of Greek philosophers is Milestenian thinkers, Thales, Anaximander, and Anaximenes. Their main concern was to come up with a cosmological theory purely based on the natural phenomena. Their approach required the rejection of all traditional explanation based on religious authority, dogma, myth, and superstition. They all agreed on in the notion that all things came from a single primal substance. Those believed it was water. Anaximander said it was a substance different from all other known substances, infinity, eternal and ageless, and Anaximander claimed it was air. Anaximander, based on the fact that human infants are helpless at birth, argued that if the first human had somehow approached on Earth as an infant, it would not have survived. Therefore, humans have evolved from other animals whose offspring are fitter. The science among Milesians was stronger than their philosophy, and somehow crude. But it encouraged many observation in many subsequent thinkers, and was also a good stimulus to approach a rational fashion. Many of the traditional questions that had previously been answered through religious and superstition. The Ionian rational view caused nothing but perplexity among some of their powerful neighbors, such as Babylonians and Egyptians, which were nations based on theocratic governments where religion played an important political and social role. Thank you.
Now we are going to talk about Pythagoras. Pythagoras is considered one of the Ionian thinkers, but outside the Milesian school. He was originally from Samos, an offshore Ionian settlement. His approach combined science with religious belief, something that would have caused horror among the Milesian schools. His philosophy has a dose of mysticism and probably an influence of the Orphic tradition. Mathematics, in the sense of demonstrative, deductive arguments, begin with Pythagoras, and he is credited as the author of the first known mathematical formulation, the theorem, which states that the square of the longest side of a right triangle equals the sum of the squares of the other two sides, like for triangle, that one. And deductive reasons of the general premises seems to have seen a Pythagorean innovation. Ethnocism began with the Lycopus and Democritus. Among the ancient schools, this approach is the closest to modern science. They believe that everything is composed of atoms, which are indestructible and physically indivisible. They were strict determinists who believed that everything happened in accordance with natural laws, and the universe, they said, has no purpose and is nothing more than a mixture of infinite atoms being shuffled and reshuffled according to the indifferent rules of nature. What is interesting about this school is that it attempts to understand the universe as objectively as possible and minimize intellectual deviation in favor of culture and mystic prejudices. Now we are going to talk about the rise of Athens, and this starts with the Sophists and Socrates. About 500 BC, the Greek city-states or policies were still largely divided. They had a common language and culture, but they were very often rivals. Some years earlier, Athens implemented a socio-political innovation by which all free male citizens had equal rights regardless of their origin and fortune. They named it democracy. Before the time of democracy, government decision-making was in the hands of a few, often aristocratic, and noble families. So it was with the aristocratic and noble families. Democracy allowed all free citizens to be part of the important decision of the polis, and they could engage in the discussion held during the deliberative assembly and tribunals. Their voices could be heard everywhere and had the same values as any other voice. In this context, speech was king, being able to discuss different topics effectively and to pursue others granted a competitive advantage. This was true not only of citizens actively involved in politics, but for any other citizen. During the court hearings, like if we talk for example, during the court hearings, prosecutor and accused had to appear in court in person, never through lawyers, and the failure or success of the process relied largely on heretical skills, and any citizen could be subject to a court hearing. This period, therefore, saw the beginning of the Sophist school.
The Sophists were intellectuals who taught courses in various topics, including rhetoric was a useful skill in Athens, because they taught in a thought of return for a fee. So no one could join these schools or these courses, especially aristocracy and a wealthy family. Political replaced the old doing way of politics in Athens, and aristocrats were trying to destroy it because this way affected their life. So the change was increased in two parts: cultural and economics. So because of these two factors, Athenians' life had changed and they were seeking for the new knowledge because they interact with other people from different worlds. Caught in the clash between cultural conservatism and innovation, we found Socrates was a pivotal figure and wisest philosophy among the Greeks according to that time, as they mentioned by the Oracle of Delphi. Before the time of Socrates, the main concern of the philosophers were the physical world, how to explain world physically. However, Socrates set a motion entirely different from what the philosophers were thinking, but he turned around to ask main question about what does it mean morality, or what does mean morality, and what does it mean ethics. And he was focused more about intangible human behavior. Most of his debates ended with more new questions. So Socrates earned new enemies, and that enemies sentenced him, and he put on the trail, and he sentenced to death.
Plato and Aristotle are the most important Greek philosophers. Their work has been the main focus of interest for students of philosophy and specialists. This is partly because, unlike most of their predecessors, what they wrote survived is an accessible form, and partly because Christian thought, which was dominant thought in the Western world during the Middle Ages and early modern age, continued a dose of Platonic and Aristotle influence. Plato was a student of Socrates who left Athens disgusted by death of his teacher. After traveling for many years, he returned to Athens and opened his famous academy. He is the best-known Greek philosophy. The triumph of his work has been complete and influential in Western philosophy. That the famous quote from Alfred North Whitehead, although an exaggeration is not far from the truth, the safest general characterization of European philosophical tradition is that it consists of series footnotes and Plato. Plato had many philosophical interests, including ethics and politics, but he is the best known for his metaphysics and epistemological ideas. One of his most influential insights is the theory of ideas. Plato notions like virtue, justice, beauty, goodness, etc. would not be possible unless we had some direct knowledge of these things in an earlier existence. We are born into this world with an imperfect memory of these forms. In that ideal of all ideas, one can experience the real forms which are perfect and universal. Our world is an imperfect parody of the Platonic, flawless and superior world of ideas. A knowledge of these forms is possible only through long and arduous study by philosophers, but their eventual enlightenment will qualify them, and they alone to rule society. Aristotle, as the student of Plato for almost 20 years, the tutor of Alexander the Great, Aristotle's interests covered a wide scope: ethics, metaphysics, physics, biology, mathematics, meteorology, astronomy, psychology, politics, and rhetoric, among other topics. Aristotle was the first thinker who systematically developed the study of logic. Some of the components of Aristotelian logic existed long before Aristotle, such as Socrates' ideas and exact definition, argumentative techniques found in Zeno of Ela, paradigms, and Plato, and many other elements traceable to legal reasoning and mathematical proof. Aristotle's logic system consists of 5 treatises known as organon, and although it does not exhaust all logic, it was pioneering one, revered for centuries and regarded as the ultimate solution to logic and reference for science. Aristotle's contribution in logic and science became an authority and remain unchallenged as late as the modern age.
During the Hellenistic age, 4 philosophical schools flourished: the Cynics, Skeptics, Epicureans, and Stoics. During this time, political power was in the hands of the Macedonians. Therefore, Greek philosophers abounded their political concern and focused on problems of the individual instead of trying to come up with plans to improve society. Their interest was how to be happy or virtue. The Cynics rejected all types of conventions: marriage, manners, religion, housing, and even decency. The Skeptic philosophical school systematized all doubts. The sense caused trouble to most philosophers, except some rare exceptions, like Plato, who simply denied the cognitive value of perception in favor of his world of ideas. On top of the skepticism of the sense, the skeptics odd moral and logical skepticism. Epicureanism claimed that life was about pursuing this world's pleasures. They only believed in the material world, a belief which attracted the opposition of the Stoics. Stoics said that everything that happened is due to divine providence. Therefore, whatever misfortune occurs, a Stoic will accept it without complaint. Stoic rejected Aristotle's view on the relevance of bodily and material goods to human happiness. Achieving happiness, Stoics said, is not important. What is actually important is to pursue happiness, since the outcome of our attempt is not fully under our own control. While Rome was expanding, Greek started to decline. The Western Mediterranean was left untouched by Alexander the Greek after First and Second Punic Wars. Rome neutralized Carthage and controlled Syracuse, the two leading city-states of the Western Mediterranean, and continued its expansion by conquering the Macedonian monarchies. During the 2nd century BCE, followed by Spain, French, and Britain. Despite its expansion and military sobriety, Rome's influence in the cultural life of Greek was not significant. On the contrary, the influence of Greek or Roman culture was deep and long-lasting. Roman gods were identified with the Olympian deities, Hellenic art, literature, architecture, philosophy, and even the language. Philosophy and even the language captivated most educated Romans. Across the millennia, the voices of the Greek philosophers have been shaping our minds, our institutions, our leaders, and our civilization. As a whole, the Greek thinkers have unquestionably proved that some problems can be approached in different ways, that common sense is not as common as we like to believe, that considering unfamiliar possibilities can enlarge our thought, and that imagination and ideas can be immortal.